Hello, everyone. How are you? Are we still in the morning time? Yeah, we're just making it. Nice to see all of you here. Dr. Carson, Secretary Carson, do you prefer one or the other?
Whatever.
They're both great.
Just don't call me a cab.
Yeah, exactly. I won't do that. Thank you for coming. I want to start in our 20 minutes that we have here talking about the tragedy on Saturday at President Trump's rally. Have you had a chance to speak with President Trump? And also, what was your initial reaction to hearing that he'd been shot?
Yes, I've talked to him. And obviously, like everybody else, I was shocked. Not horribly surprised.
Why not?
Because I've been saying for a while, there's so much hatred directed toward this man. It's only a matter of time before somebody tries to assassinate him. It's so important that we begin to tamp down the hatred and actually just talk about the issues. Wouldn't that be refreshing?
It'd be new. It'd be new.
Do that. But I also believe that there was divine intervention there. You go back and you look at the Battle of Monongahela during the French and Indian War. George Washington was a courier for General Braddock. And he had 2 horses shot from underneath him. All the other couriers were killed. He had 4 bullet holes in his overcoat and bullet fragments in his hair, but no wounds. And, it was years later one of the Indian chiefs was on his deathbed, and Washington was going to be in the area still before he was to become president. And he told his men, "Take me to see him." And when he saw him, he said, "Sir, I am an expert marksman, and I shot you many times. And my men shot you many times. Pretty soon I told them to stop shooting you. They're just wasting their bullets." But he said, "I wanted to meet the man who was protected by the Great Spirit of God." That used to be in our history book until it became politically incorrect.
When you spoke to President Trump, what did he say?
He was just very grateful to be alive, because I've been telling him for a long time that he was divinely appointed to help us get our country back.
The shooting comes in increasing political violence over the last few years. Representative Steve Scalise, who was here with my colleague Rachel Bade yesterday, the wife of the former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Paul Pelosi, victims of this type of violence, similar types of violence. How concerned are you that this is going to continue and it's going to be a part of our political process now?
Well, I think it's going to be worse if we continue down the road of demonizing each other. If we can just get to a point where we understand that, yes, there are differences in people's political philosophies, but that doesn't make us enemies. And somehow we've gone from love your neighbor to cancel your neighbor if they don't agree with you, or if they have a different yard sign. And that divides us as a nation, and you see all kinds of attempts to divide us on the basis of race, age, income, gender, religion, political affiliation, you name it, divide us. And Jesus said it best. He said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And Abraham Lincoln echoed that. And we're reaching a stage in our country now that is similar to what was going on at the time of the Civil War. And we really need to dial it back. And we're not each other's enemies. And, if 2 people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. We just need to stop, dial it back, learn how to talk to each other, learn how to put the facts in the middle of the table, and have your discussion of differences based on the facts and not on ideology.
You keep saying we, and I assume you mean the royal we the people. And, you've talked about Democrats and kind of their vilifying, in your words, of President Trump, and how much you said they hate President Trump.
I didn't say Democrats. I just said they.
People, they. But we've seen that on the right as well, right? President Trump is kind of known for his own incendiary. You worked with him, right? His own incendiary.
Yeah, no one can say that this is all one side or the other side, but one can say that we all need to engage in dialing it back.
So what responsibility do people like former President Trump have to tone it down for the right? You guys can only work on and kind of fix your own house, and Democrats will have to do it themselves. I guess, what should President Trump be doing right now?
Well, I was pleased to hear that his speech was being rewritten for tomorrow night to take a more conciliatory tone, a more inclusive tone, and that needs to be done by everybody. It particularly needs to be done, and I'm not picking on you, but it needs to be done by the media. Because remember, the press is the only business protected by our Constitution. And it's because they're supposed to disseminate unbiased information to the populace so that the country can be run on the will of the people. But how can it be run on the will of the people when the people who are disseminating the information are putting their thumb on the scale? So I'm hoping that young journalists such as yourself.
Thank you for calling me young. I appreciate it.
Will recognize the tremendous responsibility to be truthful and not to buy into ideological preferences.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit on the media question, right?
Okay.
Because often there are problems within the media because we are all over the place, just like Republicans are all over the place in different parts of the country and different ideologies. That's the same thing with the media, right? There's no capital M media, and we are often a reflection of what we are told, like yourself, what we hear from the conversations, especially for us at Politico, behind closed doors. Though we're not making these conversations up, right? The fights that are happening ideologically and now physically in this country are real. And, it seems it would be incumbent upon leaders like yourself and former President Trump and the folks speaking on stage to lead everyone that way. Because if you guys, not you in particular, not to pick on you as you said, but the leaders of this country change their tone, that would reflect itself in the media, because we are just a reflection of what we are told and hear.
Well, now let me push back a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because what I have noticed is a tremendous uniformity, particularly in mainstream media. A story comes out, boom, they're all saying exactly the same thing, even using the same language. You think that's a coincidence?
Well, there's background calls that we all get on. Some of these things happen all together at the same time. There's no cabal of editors across, because trust me, the competitors are not hanging out, getting together and having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, but most of the people don't disagree with each other. They all sort of go in the same direction. And it's really very ideological. If people who watch Fox and Newsmax exclusively have different philosophies from people who watch CNN and MSNBC regularly, there's a lot of things that some people don't even know about.
Agreed.
And that's not right. You should really be able to talk about everything in an objective way. And it's a journey. I think we're hopefully in the process of making the right turns in that journey so that we get to the right place. Because the end result of continued divisiveness, if you know world history, it's not good.
We could have this media conversation all day, but these folks probably want to hear some more, so I'll move on here. On the vice presidential selection, JD Vance, I'll keep it pretty simple. What'd you think?
I think JD is a very smart individual who has a wide range of experiences, from the depths of poverty to being a millionaire. And I think it gives him the ability to relate to a large portion of the population. And I'm hopeful that he will use this opportunity to particularly appeal to the young generation.
Yeah, he would be the first millennial vice president.
Yes, and to help them to really begin to analyze things based on facts and throw the ideological stuff out of the window. We just don't need that. We need facts.
he has made something that a lot of folks who used to be either never Trumpers or Trump critics, the journey from calling him in a text message to a former roommate America's Hitler, saying he was noxious, reprehensible, to now being the vice presidential pick. That's quite the shift. I guess, where do you think this switch up came from?
Well, I think he was willing to actually observe. You know, a lot of people hate Donald Trump. And when you ask them, why do you hate him? They can't really articulate why they hate him.
I can send you some that can't articulate it very well, just if you need it.
I'm sure you can, but I said a lot of people, because they just buy into this is an evil person. But there are others, very much like JD, who say, wow, this man actually got control of the border. This man actually made us energy independent. You know, this man has helped our economy, made opportunities for lots of people, did such things as made funding for HBCUs regular so that you don't have to come with a hat in hand every year. You know, those are pretty amazing things. This is a man who brought some respect back on the world stage. And if you look at the objective components of what he did, it's pretty good.
But I also think, you know, objectively, part of the reasons why people have issues with President Trump also have to deal with the way that he speaks about others, the kinds of things that he says. You talk about facts quite a bit. This is a president who, has a tenuous relationship with the truth at times,
Sure.
right?
But let me ask you a question.
Of course.
If you were very ill and you needed a complex operation to save your life, would you rather have the surgeon who has a terrible bedside manner but saves everybody, or the one who has sweet words and kills everybody?
It's a good. They like that one. They like that one. I assume we'll be hearing that some more from you, sir. You know, it was reported that you were on the list for vice president. What can you tell us about how that process went?
I know very little about it.
No. You were vetted. Did you have to send in any vetting documents?
I'm sure there was some exchange of information, but remember, they already know me. Mm-hmm. You know, so there's not a whole lot of vetting that needs to be done in that case.
You've been vetted, you say. After the attempted assassination of former President Trump, Vance said that the rhetoric from the Biden campaign directly led to the shooting. And you know, you're talking about changing the language. Do you agree with his assessment? Is that helpful to what you're saying needs to happen in this country?
I think it would be very helpful if all sides backed off of talking about individuals. Mm-hmm. You know, if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all, because it poisons the atmosphere. And when you stop and you think about it, what good does it do? Mm-hmm. Does it really make the world a better place?
Have you had this conversation with President Trump?
I've talked about a lot of things with him.
Is this one of them?
And one of the things that he frequently says is, yep, you're right about that. And
but he hasn't really changed his tenor and tone.
I think him, along with a lot of people on the other side, almost have like a knee-jerk response. When somebody says something about them, they have to respond.
Like kids on the playground.
And
jump back at them.
And I used to be like that, so I understand it. And the thing that changed me was my relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the reason I got angry and I wanted to lash out at people is because it was about me. Me, mine, I, somebody did this to me, I want this, you know. And if you can step outside of the center of the circle and let it be about other people, you're very unlikely to react that way.
So many of the former presidents, the officials that worked for him, have refused to support him publicly this time around. Who knows how they're going to vote in November? You're one of the few speaking at the convention. We saw former Ambassador Nikki Haley last night. You've stuck by him this entire time. Why?
Because, you know, the reason that I entered the political arena in the first place, because I would have never thought that I would end up in the political arena years ago.
That's what every politician says.
No, I just wouldn't. But thinking about children
Yeah.
and grandchildren and the kind of environment that they're going to grow up in, I decided that I couldn't relax and just sit by and enjoy the fruits of all my labor and not worry about anybody else. And that's why I did it.
But why are there so many others who aren't supporting him this time around? Your colleagues, the people that sat around that cabinet table with you.
Because I think they haven't really done the analysis. They haven't thought about if they were that patient who needed that operation. They just thought about, how do I feel about this?
But I think General John Kelly has probably done some of the calculations in his head.
Maybe.
Bill Barr.
Maybe, and maybe not. But you know, this applies to everybody. Democrats, Republicans, all of us. And it applies not to just Donald Trump, it applies to everybody who uses inflammatory language. We all need to just stop and think about, are we friends and neighbors and colleagues and co-workers, or are we deadly enemies? Which one are we? We need to make that decision. We need to make it soon, because the things that happen to nations that go down this pathway are not good. And just because we're the United States of America doesn't mean that we're immune from the kinds of things that destroy other nations.
But the concerns they have aren't just, about how they feel about how President Trump talks or how they talk about President Trump. It's sometimes on policies, on especially for those who worked with him on the foreign policy side. A lot. That's where their concerns are about how he speaks and acts on the world stage. So it doesn't feel like it's just their non-warm.
Well, I haven't heard them articulate any significant policy differences. I've heard them articulate personality issues.
I want to get into black voters, because it's rare you have a black reporter with a former black secretary, a black former secretary. You are still black, it seems.
Well, not according to Biden, I'm not.
Well, I'm gonna leave that one alone. I'm nonpartisan here at Politico. Why does it seem to you that there, in the polling we're seeing and in some of the reporting that we're seeing, that there are so many black men who are at least interested, who seem interested in Donald Trump, if not excited to vote for him?
I think it's because they realize that his philosophy is a rising tide.
Which philosophy?
Trump.
Okay.
A rising tide lifts all boats. And he has enacted policies that lifted their boats, that made their lives better. And he doesn't sort of pick and choose this group versus that group and say, well, this group had the advantage that time, so now let's give this group the advantage. Forget about all that, and let's just do things that help everybody. I think that's attractive, particularly to people who in the past have perhaps experienced some unfairness.
What are the policies that he has that, are specifically tailored to, black people, right? You think about, there are a lot of different issues that affect all people, but they impact black people more. There's that saying in the black community, when America gets a cold, black people get the flu.
Right.
So what are those specific policies that he has ready for a second Trump administration?
Things like sealing our border, because you have a lot of people who are coming in who are taking a lot of the non-skilled jobs. Well, unfortunately, we haven't reached a point in our society yet.
But black people don't just work in non-skilled jobs.
Well,
we're both in very skilled jobs.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Okay, you're right.
Unfortunately, we haven't reached a point yet where where black people are evenly distributed throughout the job market. You still have a disproportionate number who benefit from those low-skilled jobs. We need to keep working on that. But in the meantime, those are the people who are disproportionately hurt when you have people coming in and taking those jobs. And you've probably noticed that the unemployment rate for blacks has gone up about a point and a half since the Biden administration took over.
It's down.
People feel that. No, don't believe that.
Don't believe that. Okay.
Go look at the real numbers. And
where are you getting your numbers?
From economists.
Mm-hmm.
This is easy to find. This
Mm-hmm.
is not difficult information to find.
Yeah, no, I know.
But even put the numbers aside, just think about it logically. If you have a bunch of people who benefit largely from low-skilled jobs, and then you take another group of people who benefit from those and you put them into the same pool, guess what? Those original groups are not going to find jobs as easily. So you don't even have to put numbers into it. You just think logically, and you can see that that would be the case.
So the border, his immigration policies, what other policies?
Educational policies, where you push education for reading, writing, arithmetic, basic things that you need, over ideology. So as you've seen, we have people now who are pushing things like, what is your gender, what is your pronoun, bringing, transgender people into schools and
but they've been
exposing kids like that. Those are kinds of things that make a difference. Mm-hmm. If parents want to expose their children to that, fine. But when schools do that, I'll go even further than that. I'll say if the school is teaching the kids everything they need to know, and they're all stellar students, and they still have a lot of time left over, okay, then you can teach them all that stuff. But let's not substitute the things that are essential for people to know for things that are not.
We only have a couple minutes left here, and I want to get into housing. It's something that the American people are feeling. We just had the mayors here and the congressmen here talking about housing policy. President Biden just released a housing policy that would call for stripping a tax benefit from landlords who increase their tenants' rent more than 5% per year. It only applied to landlords who own more than 50 units, or larger landlords. Is this a policy that you think would help with the housing crisis that we have, the rental crisis that we have?
Well, rather than complicating the situation, I would take it the other direction. Let's uncomplicate the situation. Mm-hmm. Let's get rid of a lot of the regulatory barriers that drive the prices up so high. That's why in California, you recently saw where they built a big multifamily thing for the homeless at $600,000 per unit. Why is it $600,000 per unit? Is the technology such that we have all pearl handles on the faucets? No, that's not why. The reason is because you have regulation after regulation, some of them duplicating things, and that takes something that maybe cost $150,000 to $200,000 to $300,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 to $600,000. When I was secretary, those units were about $400,000. Mm-hmm. It keeps going up because we keep adding regulations. And we had actually hatched a pretty good plan for Los Angeles for the homeless there. I was working with Mayor Garcetti, with Governor Newsom, with several of the county execs, and several government agencies, by using government land and by actually addressing the real problems of the homeless, because 40 to 60%, depending on which numbers you use, are either drug addicted or mentally ill. And just taking them off the street and putting them in a place like Housing First, and don't get me wrong, I like Housing First, but you got to do Housing Second and Housing Third. Housing Second, you diagnose why they were on that condition, and Housing Third, you fix it. If you don't do that, 90+% of them end up back on the street. So, we were taking all of that into consideration. And then guess what happened? COVID. Mm-hmm. Everything was off the table.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we can't work.
Get back to it.
Yeah, we need to work together.
Yeah. I'm probably going to get some eyes here from my producer Parker soon, but before I let you go, if President Trump were to win and he asked you, would you serve in the cabinet again?
You know, I'm open to lots of different things. My real goal is to make sure that we save our country for everybody, and particularly for the young people who are coming after us.
Would you want to help save the country in the cabinet for President Trump?
I would want to help save the country in lots of different ways, and we will see. We will see which way the Lord leads.
If the Lord led you to the cabinet, would you want to be in HUD again?
I will always do what the Lord wants me to do.
Exactly. I think the Lord might lead you to the cabinet. So I'm going to say, would you want to do HUD again, or is there another department that you'd be interested in? You talked about education quite a bit just now.
Well, as you may or may not know, currently I'm heading up the American Cornerstone Institute, which focuses on the cornerstone principles that made us into a great nation: faith, liberty, community, and life. And we have a Little Patriots program which is spreading like wildfire, teaching the young people what the principles of our country are and what our history is: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we don't shy away from any of the bad stuff that happened. But the fact of the matter is, there's a heck of a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. We just have to teach it the right way. So,
Secretary of the Department of Good.
I'm going to continue that work, or I want to continue that work. So, we'll look at all these things, but one thing I can guarantee you is that I'm going to continue to work very hard to move our country in the right direction.
Secretary Carson, thank you so much for this.
Thank you all.